I'm Jim Collison and live from our virtual studios, literally around the world. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on April 14th, 2020. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, love to have you join us in our chat room. There's actually a link on the live page right above me for there. Take you to our YouTube instance. You can sign into the chat. We will be taking your questions live during the program. If you have questions after the fact or really questions about anything, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Actually, right down there, there's a little thumbs up button. If you click on that, that helps us out, gives us some exposure on YouTube. And then there's a little subscribe button. Actually, it's the other way, that way. Click on that, and every time we go live, you'll get a notification that we are. A good way to do that so you don't forget. Of course, if you listen to podcasts, you can search Gallup Webcast on any podcast player and subscribe to us there. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup out of our Sydney office. And Ann, it's always great to have you on Call to Coach. Welcome back.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's great to be here, and I'm loving watching all of the people responding in their live comments in the feed. I'm seeing some of my old friends there that I haven't connected with in a while, so really, really happy to have you, joining Call to Coach. So great to see you guys. I'm also really pleased to have the opportunity to address this topic today in this sort of special edition, really, of Strengths in COVID times, Called to Coach. My guest is Bruno Zade, and he is a senior learning consultant based here in Gallup's North Sydney office, along with myself. Bruno leads our Australia-New Zealand coaching community, and over the last week, he has conducted some informal Gallup polls, asking hundreds of our Gallup-certified coaches in Australia and New Zealand about the issues that they and their clients are facing and how they are intentionally using their CliftonStrengths to address those issues. Bruno, welcome. Thank you so much for reaching out to the coaching community and for sharing what you have learned with us. Let's start with your top 5 strengths, please.
Good afternoon, Anne. So my top 5 are learner, achiever, discipline, command, and activator. But in reality, I use 12 strengths every day.
Yeah. Well, I most certainly saw a lot of those top 5 strengths on display this weekend because you worked so hard to get this information from different coaches and different folks. And before we really get underway, I'm going to pull up a slide that just kind of acknowledges really and recognizes some of the certified coach that responded to your call out, Bruno, to get some information about, what they were experiencing and seeing in this time. So want to thank all of the guys there and girls that are on that list that responded so quickly to get back with some of the talking points that Bruno's going to address later in the show. If you're interested in reaching out to any of those coaches, you see their names and their businesses, and you can check them out on LinkedIn, or you can go to the Gallup Certified Strengths Coaching Directory, and you will find them there as well. But in all sincerity, guys, thank you so much for contributing to this really and helping us understand what you're seeing out there across Australia. So we have about over 500 Gallup certified coaches in Australia and New Zealand. I think Bruno reached out to about half of them, and we had some folks come back with some really good info. So thanks, Bruno, and thank you to all of those coaches there. Before we go into what you've learned, Bruno, from our coaches, I do want to back up and to touch on some of Gallup's perspective on strengths and flag some important things that we want to make sure that we keep in mind during this time. And I'll send out a thank you to Tom Matson and Jim Asplin for their contributions here. Tom is our education subject matter expert. Jim is our principal researcher in the predictive analytics practice, and they're both based in the Minneapolis area of the U.S. So when I reached out to them, I had a few questions of my own that I wanted to ask. We really talked about what happens to an individual's strengths in times of crisis. How do we advise our clients to apply their strengths during high stress times? What data does Gallup have on the impact of strengths on well-being? What data do we have on the impact of knowing and aiming our strengths on things like job seeking, especially following a job loss? And what data on the impact of knowing and aiming our strengths do we have around burnout? So those were the items really that I started with, but I got a lot more information that, again, I think will inform the conversation that we have with Bruno later on and talking about what we hear from the coaches. Some of the points I wanted to share. Number one, think during this time about not siloing our strength science. It's so important to understand how connected it is with our well-being and our engagement. So leveraging our natural advantages, our natural abilities of thought, feeling, and behaving should be used to improve our well-being and our engagement. That's really the goal, whether it's a time of crisis or whether it's a regular time. So don't silo our strength science from engagement and well-being. The second thing is, as you will all know as certified coaches, strengths are intrinsic, but they can present differently when our well-being or our engagement is off. So when I was speaking to Jim Asplin about this, and I said, how should we use our strengths in high stress times? He said it's sort of like asking him how he uses his right hand during high stress times. He said, I don't really think about it. It's always there, and it does everything the way it always has because it's an integral part of me. But having said that, crisis does and can present challenges. For example, he said it's harder for him right now to use his analytical strength because he's more distracted by everything that's going on in the world, yet even more demands than ever have been placed on that analytical strength. So perhaps a good way to approach that as we think about ourselves and how we're responding with our strengths, it's really about asking ourselves the question, how is stress getting to me in this time? Trying to increase our self-awareness of how the stress is playing out in us, so that we can really use our strengths to manage it, to manage how that's coming out. So we know that for some people in this time of crisis and change, the change that is forced upon them will, for some, be an exciting time, or at least something that they're better at managing or tolerating than other people, depending on their strengths themes. And we know that some strengths themes are associated with sort of one end of the spectrum of change, and the other, or the other, depending on what they are. But the beauty of strengths at this time is that it gives us the knowledge that we are unique and that we will all react differently to various types of change. So that allows us to better anticipate our reactions, and also to give us some perspective regarding those and how others might react differently than we do, whether it's our family, our friends, or our colleagues. So often when we are looking at how our strengths are responding, we'll talk about balconies and basements. So those of you who are Gallup certified will know a lot about balconies and basements, or the raw or mature form that our patterns of thought, feeling, and behaving can take on. So often when we see those as being different, or in others as being a bit different or off, we describe it as being in the basement, right? Or the raw form. But it's important to remember that the balconies and basement conversation is really only a model for conversation. So it allows us to understand where those sit. But moving from the basement to the balcony is not our ultimate strengths goal. It's understanding why we're in the basement in the first place. And we know that the answer will most certainly be based in engagement or well-being space. And that is when we then leverage those natural patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior to help improve that situation and get out of that basement. Lastly, there's a lot of research that Gallup has put out over the years around the impact that strengths has on well-being. When you get certified and as you work with your clients, you coaches especially know that when we use our strengths, it energizes us, right? It empowers us. It allows us to stay focused on a task longer which is a bit of flow, isn't it? And we feel better about ourselves when we use our strengths. Those are all really important considerations right now as we try to keep an eye on our well-being and our engagement levels. I want to point you towards just one piece of research. There's a lot out there. Let's see if you can see this as I hold it up. This report was written by, or case study was written by Jim Asplin in 2012. And it is based on an American population sample. However, what it found was that the more hours per day that people got to use their strengths to do what they do best, the less likely they are to report experiencing worry, stress, anger, sadness, or physical pain. It also talks about how it gives a boost in positive emotions the more that we use our strengths. The more hours per day adults believe they use their strengths, the more likely they are to have to report having plenty of energy, feeling well rested, being happy, smiling or laughing a lot, learning something interesting, and being treated with respect. And lastly, we've also probably heard a fair bit about the additive effect of strengths, which is really that it's associated with feelings of accomplishment and timelessness. Energizing experiences are often evidence of strengths at work and can help inoculate adults against experiencing stress. Again, remember that this was all written and this research was done pre-COVID. So apparently time not only flies when we're having fun, but also when we're using our strengths. And again, that's referring to flow. Both act to reduce a person's chances of feeling stressed or worried about the present or the future. And they make life feel meaningful and productive. So certainly, I think that piece of research alone, Bruno, is a really good just a really good encouragement for us to really be focusing on our strengths and understanding why we might want to be focusing on those at the moment. I know I've told you this, Bruno. I have a lot of clients that are in the healthcare space, and initially, when I was having conversations with, for instance, one of my friends who runs an emergency department at one of the district hospitals, I thought, I just don't know that a strengths conversation is the appropriate thing to intervene there to try to help. But having prepared for this show and gone back through the research, it's reminded me again how tightly connected strengths and a strengths approach is to well-being, prevention of burnout, and that sort of thing. So, and certainly when we're talking about managing our staff who are working remotely, when we're talking about how we manage our families, when we have children who are homeschooling there, all of those different elements, it really does help us understand. Strengths helps us predict behavior, right? It gives us a roadmap or a blueprint for how people could potentially respond to things. So that's thank you for being patient, Bruno, while I gave a bit of context on some of the Gallup perspective on that. I'm very keen now to turn our attention to what you learned in your informal research about the Gallup certified strengths coach community. So if you were to go into some of the highlights, Bruno, that you heard from our coaches, let's kind of talk through those sort of one by one about the questions that you asked them and the things that you heard that you found to be really particularly helpful and useful.
Okay, so firstly, I would like to thank all the coaches to be so responsive, because I sent this questionnaire on a Friday, Easter, and instead of eating a lot of chocolate, they have answered to my question, and it's so helpful and precious insight. So thank you. So when I think about the four main highlights, I would say the first one is focus on what we can control for ourselves and our client. The second one is revisit the basics of our strength. The third one is changing our approach. And the last one is be innovative. So that's the four main highlights. But in reality, there were much more, but we couldn't address all of them. However, they're available if you want to know.
Fantastic. Do you want to go into those a bit more deeply, or would you, I'd also be interested in understanding what were some of the issues that our coaches were facing as individuals and how they're applying their strengths to deal with that. you pick. We can either go more deeply into the four that you're talking about, or talk about the issues the coaches are facing.
Okay, so I will go a little bit more deeply. So I have learner number 1 and input in number 6. So I love insight. So let's start by the first one, focus on what we can control for ourselves and our clients. I would like to repeat a quote from Donna Thibault, which is one of our coaches, and I find this quote very inspiring. So it is, I feel this is a time when we are reminded of how factors well outside our imagination and control can have such a profound impact on us. So as an example, for people with a lot of building relationship domain, such as relator, who, so one thing you cannot control, it's in this time of COVID, we don't have any more face-to-face interaction. And we don't have any more, we have to respect the social distancing. Most of the business are closed. So we need to find a new way. However, you still have the possibility of what you can control to reach out to people via video conference, to stay connected, send SMS, weekly catch up, group video conference. We have all these technology who are very useful, and more than ever, we are using it currently. So there are a new way to do it. If I continue on the second one, so the second point was revisit the basics of our strength. So here, I think it's very important, like you mentioned, Anne, talking about basement and balcony. So basement and balcony strength are our lens. It's who we are. But as you know, it's depending on the context. And here we have an environment of change. So applying our strength needs to be adjusted based on what we want to achieve. So if I take an example, we had a conversation yesterday, Anne, about your empathy and your restorative. How does that work in this world? And I have the same conversation with different people. And empathy, basically, you might feel all this crisis with a lot of death, and it's might be a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. And with the restorative in action, you want to fix things. But the problem here, it's a lot of people who have restorative feel they want to fix, and they realize the problem is too big and we cannot fix everything. So it's very important to, in this context, redefine what you want to achieve, what you try to achieve, and set up clear new expectation.
Can I jump in there really quickly, Bruno? I think that's excellent. One of the things that we know, again, is that there are certain themes, right? That based on research and also on inductive reasoning that tell us that certain themes respond or are more associated with a positive reaction to change, like adaptability and futuristic, ideation, strategic, learner, input, self-assurance, intellection, and command. They tend to respond more positively to most change, whereas for some people, of course, you can't say it just in isolation, can you? Because it really does depend on the other strengths that are around them. And some people with high ideation or strategic will become engines of worry, right? Others, or catastrophe, imagining all the ways that things could get worse. Or others could be more open about new things. So again, we don't want to pigeonhole people here, but as we think about how people might respond, it gives us some space to consider that some of these themes are going to be more, it will lead people to be more resilient, more adaptable, more energized in positive ways, right?
Absolutely. And strength doesn't work in isolation. So that's an example to put a situation, but in reality, strengths interact with each other and create some different situations. That's why we have 1 chance on 33 million to have the same strength in the same order. So now, in this context, what we should consider also, it's when we revisit the basic of our strength, is to consider some complementary partnership, because it's a different environment. So we need to reach others, the community, to have some new perspective and to share our strength and to crack all together what can we do. So we need to partner with people that can help you in what you try to achieve. And I remember an example a few years ago. It was someone who partnered in Power of Two, and this person have a low communication. And part of his role was to basically deliver some briefing every 3 months. So I think you love and you know the story. You can continue a little bit. So my point, this partnership was basically to find the right person to deliver the presentation in public speaking. And in exchange, this person who have a whole achiever was able to do all the part of executing for the another one. That's a perfect example of collaboration and complementary partnership.
Yeah, I think that was you and me, right? That was us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we even won an award for that, a power of two. There you go, strengths in action.
So the third point was changing our approach. And here I have a nice example. I have one of our coach, Adam Callender, and I thank him for this quote. So he got ideation on his top 5. And what he's doing currently, it's he go into his top 6 to 12 theme to find a new way to do things. And I find that brilliant because we have the tendency to use our top 5 every day. But in this context, we don't know the intensity of our top 10 or 12 strengths. So we could potentially invest in our strengths who are more appropriate to the situation. And that's a nice way to do it. The second quote from Murray Guest, it's aim your strength to develop a well-being plan that motivates and works for you. Don't do what everyone else are doing. So I think it's important to individualize an approach that works for you, to not try to copy others, and to develop a personal well-being plan that motivates you. So for people with discipline, it could be you wake up very earlier at 4 a.m. and you do a walk to avoid people instead of naturally you are going to the gym during the day. For people who have high competition, you could create a challenge with the children at home to stimulate this strength. And your strength, it's your natural way. It's who you are. The point here is to, in this context of crisis, be able to reshape in a way that match what we're experiencing.
Yeah, excellent. I love it. I love it. What else did you have? The fourth one was what? Innovation?
Yes, the first one is innovation. So here it's very interesting. We have one of our very popular coach, Dion Redemeyer, who is well known everywhere in the world. He got connectedness. He knows everyone. And he has been very generous with his answer. So his strategy is to combine CliftonStrengths with a model who's called VUCA. It was created in the 80s. And this model, it's really about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And for those who want to know more, please contact directly Dion or let us know because he's very specialized in that. And here he has been very innovative, but he's also a mindset of agile coaching using strength. So I find this answer very interesting.
Yeah, it's excellent. I think Dion is brilliant at taking different things that are sort of, concepts and ideas and theories that become in vogue. And he's really excellent about linking those to strengths and whether it's through agile or VUCA or, what have you. So I think being innovative that way and looking at this as an opportunity to be able to link strengths to a different sort of flavor of interventions will be quite successful for coaches and folks who do that for sure.
Yes, I would like to add one more point. The magic of strength is natural. You can plant strength with any model, and it's very engaging. And if there is a time to use strength, it's really now. That's the right time.
Yeah, 100%. So Bruno, what sorts of issues are you hearing from the coaches that they're facing as individuals and as certified coaches out there?
Okay, so I have many issues that I have collected. I will take the 3 main issues.
Perfect.
Managing new way of working virtually. That's the first one. The second one will be managing productivity and performance while being at home. And the third one, balancing work at home, family time, and homeschooling.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain a little bit about the first one?
Yes, please. If you don't mind just going into them a little bit deeper. Great.
Yes. So regarding managing new way of working virtually, for people who have learner, some of them say, I spent a fair bit of downtime researching, watching, learning video and emerging channel of communication like Slack, Zoom, Teams, Yammer. People use also significance to place more than normal to learn about Zoom and other activities that work well on the coaching community. By the way, it looks like that Zoom seems to be the platform much of the coach are using currently. For connectedness, it's investigating major trends where things are moving. For individualization, tailoring approach to meet client unique needs. For relator, organize virtual drinks in pair with friend so we can still catch up.
Yeah.
And strategic, it's offering complementary coaching to those in my network who need. And it's remind me a recent call to coach I listened with Dean Jones, where he say at the moment, people are struggling and we need more than ever to do some coaching on pro bono to help people, to help the community, to give back. It doesn't mean that you don't have to work and survive like everyone, but people need help. And that's a very good opportunity to help people.
Yeah. And in that same call to coach, I think he did 2 different ones, didn't he, recently? I think if they're not on the Gallup website, they'd be on the YouTube live channel now. But Dean did great 2 different shows talking about how to produce really good webinars, right? So helping our coaches who've traditionally perhaps only worked face-to-face understand the things they should consider and the way they can design a really impactful webinar. So for a lot of these issues that we're touching on today, we'll have some solutions that we can point you towards. Papers we're putting out, webinars that we're running. We're really trying to sort of, get behind our coaches and our clients and support them during this time. Sorry, Bruno,
Yes.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, no. And to finish with this slide, basically, the main takeaway I remember from the Dean Jones session, it's we are now on virtual because we work remotely and we don't know how long time it will stay. However, there are a big difference between doing a webinar and doing a virtual session. We have now the capability to use some platform who provide exactly the same experience as a face-to-face if we know how to use a platform. We have in Gallup experienced last year LHPT course where I was amazed because I've done the course on face-to-face and the course on Zoom. And the breakout session, I find them personally more engaging than the face-to-face. But that's a personal opinion. So we can do it, absolutely.
Yeah. So what else? What else were you finding about the second one, which was
managing productivity and performance while being at home?
Yes. Yeah.
So here there are something very interesting. Apparently, people with command, self-assurance, achiever love the challenge. They want to go for it and crack it. And I have 2 of these strengths. I can tell you that I'm not afraid by this crisis. The only thing I want is to go through it and go for it. But we realize also that people with adaptability or connectedness have a natural instinct to go with the flow, to adapt quickly. People with strategic has been helpful for me to think through my approach and pass through this chaos. They really use the strategic to see some new way. And it's very interesting to see this note. So that's what I've collected for this point.
Yeah, excellent.
For balancing work at home, family time, and homeschooling, that's a big challenge of the population. I heard that everywhere in the news. People with positivity find the good on everything And that's quite nice to have positivity and to lead with this strength at the moment.
Yeah.
I also notice that people with focus have the capability to stay concentrate long time and long hours despite noise and children around them. Now, the basement, I will say, it's we have to be careful when we have high focus to still balance the work at home, because it's so easy to be so focused and so in the zone that we ignore the rest because we don't realize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that definitely when we think about types of change that folks are having to deal with, we do know that some of the themes are associated with a more interactive or extroverted work style, right? Activator, communication, woo, positivity. And some are more associated with more individual styles, right? So they may not be struggling as much. So that could be discipline, focus, consistency, deliberative intellection. But it really depends, again, as we talked before, about, what else is around it. But the next one is about working from home, isn't it? And homeschooling. Is that right?
We are on homeschooling right now.
Right.
So
Go for it.
the last point of this one, and you touch a point, it's discipline. So discipline have the ability to break down the day to balance. So they set up some time and they stick to what they decide. And if it's on the top of that with the combine of other strengths, they are really able to manage very well the time for homeschooling, the afternoon to work, the time with their partners, etc. That's worked well for them. And they probably have a more capability to work independently at home. They don't need necessarily all the people around them.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is excellent too, and you and I talked about this before, but right now, with all of the frustrations and challenges that people are having around homeschooling and trying to work whilst their children are there, we've talked a lot about this year about strengths-based parenting, and we've talked about, we actually are in the initial conversations of launching a train the trainer course for folks who want to learn how to have conversations with people about their own strengths as parents, and also spotting the strengths of their children, or looking at the Strengths Explorer, which is for 10 to 14-year-olds, or even looking at Clifton Strengths for Students, which is 15 and above, so that when they're working with their children at home and homeschooling them, they can start practicing spotting those strengths in their children and talking about those. So now is a good time, I think, for our coaches to be thinking about that, and maybe even upskilling themselves as well around that, so that they can start to deliver that to their clients. Because now that we have this opportunity to be delivering things in a virtual environment, and they have their own little think tank right there in their house with their children as they're trying to teach them, it sounds like it could be a good time for a strengths-based parenting workshop or course.
Absolutely, that's a perfect time, and it's what I'm doing currently. I'm an advocate of strength-based parenting. So for those who have learned or want to know more, what I recommend is this book, Strength-Based Parenting. So you will learn a lot about how you approach with your children. And if you need to know more, please reach out. We are here to help you.
Excellent. So when we start to think about the things that our coaches are hearing from their clients, Bruno, what are they saying? What are they telling you? What are the top issues that they're seeing with their clients?
Yes, well, that's a very interesting one, because most of our coaches are independent or small business, and our clients are not necessarily in this configuration. However, as a human being, we can see some pattern. So the first one, it's dealing with the uncertainty of work changing. For some, it's too much work, and some other, unfortunately, and I'm very sad for them, it's the loss of their job. The second one, it's worry about how they will keep team engaged and motivated in this continue for the long haul, fear, anxiety among staff. And here I would like to point one reference, which is fantastic. It's this book, It's the Manager, because it's a book that you use like a guide, and it gives you a lot of tips for your team and how you can engage and what you can do. And the third one, it's ensuring our level of productivity are maintained, particularly when working from home. So some coaches have provided a few questions to ask who can be very helpful. It's asking the question how your strength can help, and what specific action you can take. And also intentionally checking with the team member to have a chat. But what I mean is, as a manager or as a coach, in this time of change, is not necessarily related to only work. It has to be a personnel with a lot of empathy. It's really asking the person, how are you? And go in this deep communication to just helping, to just be empathetic and support people. That's very important.
Yeah.
Be able to listen, to have some empathy, and communicate with positive intent to reduce this fear and this anxiety and also the unknown.
Yeah, excellent. That's excellent, Bruno. And maybe we can even get our producer Jim Collison to throw the link into the chat room for the COVID-19 leading through disruption that we have on Gallup Access. So we've created this sort of pillar page that has all of the research that we're doing right now around COVID-19 and the impact that's having, how leaders can lead. And then it also has information, and we'll continue to have more information on burnout and well-being, because it's really important as we talk to managers and to leaders, about trust, hope, stability, and compassion, and all of those things, that we don't forget that we also have to keep an eye on the leaders and the managers' strengths and their well-being and their levels of engagement, because if we're all turning to the leaders to give us that, who's looking after the leaders? So we want to make sure that we keep that human element of understanding and appreciating that these are folks trying to do the best that they can in difficult circumstances, and what we have to share, as a lot of that's outlined on that COVID-19 site, would be something that you may find useful. So I think, Jim's just put it in the chat room. So have a look there, guys, and that will keep checking in on that, because it will continue to be updated every week as we put more and more out there.
And to add to point Anne on that, I think it's very important. We know that in terms of employee and people, the manager play around 70% of the place. And I would like to insist the importance for manager to touch point with their people every single week, if you can, every day, but doesn't have to be long, but just a touch points, because they need you, they work remotely, and it's very challenging. And for the coach who listen, it's the time to reach to all these managers, because as you can say, Anne, well, they have even less support. So they need you to boost them, to energize them, to work with their strength.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, lots of those great articles out there that you'll find probably in that COVID site that's talking about working from home. Jim just did a call to coach with Adam Hickman, who has done so much research on working from home and remote working over many, many years. It's just now, we're pulling him in front of the camera all the time, right, Jim, in order to have him be talking about this content that he's had and that is put out there. So it's really quite good stuff. That show was done recently as well. Hey.
Yeah, we've actually done a couple. So one around kind of parenting, one around teams, and one around well-being with Ryan Wolf, one of our senior wellness experts at Gallup. Those are available. I put a link in the chat room earlier to the live page. You can see those right now.
Hey, Jim, do you have a link to that new careers pillar that was launched too? Is that open to the public in Gallup Access?
I do. Let me see if I can pull that up. We've got a teamwork one too, by the way, that we've put together on Teams, and that applicable to as we've sent teams home in a lot of cases, right? That weren't before, not all, and I dropped that into the chat room as well. Teams are also under an enormous amount of stress that they haven't. So not everybody's come home here in the United States. We're about a third. And so there's still 2/3 working under enormous amounts of stress. And so there's opportunities as we think about these new conditions that they're under, whether it's long hours or it's high pressure or, whatever it might be. We've got some opportunities and some advice to help managers and teams kind of cope with that stress.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that, Jim. And I saw that Jim's just put into the chat room the careers one, how to improve my career. And I guess if people are listening to this show, anything other than live, how do they get these links?
We'll actually put them in the show notes when we produce this. So
Okay.
all of these shows have a complete transcription and they have links to all these, and I'll make sure Mark includes them.
Yeah, thanks for
in
that. That's
You bet.
perfect. And Bruno, I've jumped ahead and we'll have to go back, but I wanted to flag that while I thought about it, because I know that one of the things that we asked the coaches, and also that I asked my internal Gallup folks, was what do we do, or what are we doing with strengths around those who are losing their jobs and those who are starting to seek jobs. So I think because they've been displaced or what have you, that careers link is quite useful at the moment, for that. And I think, again, we've got a lot of some feedback and research from our higher education space about when students in universities take strengths, they feel far more capable. Their self-efficacy goes up as far as their ability to get a job and to understand what they have to offer and how they can bring that to interviews and that sort of thing. So some of our coaches are probably spending a lot of time with their clients talking about how strengths can be used to improve their career, whether it's finding a new job or figuring out what they want to be when they grow up. So again, all of these things are available on Gallup Access or on Gallup.com, and you guys can access those and share those with your clients as well. Sorry, Bruno, I interrupted there. What were some of those other things we were talking about? Well-being and burnout, and how they might use strengths, and how your coaches can say they're using strengths to address some of those topics.
Yes, absolutely. So before to start there, I think it's very important to review what's mean well-being. So Gallup have defined well-being in 5 elements: the purpose of career well-being, social well-being, financial well-being, physical well-being, and community well-being. If you want to know more, there's this book, which is fantastic. As you can see, I have learner number 1, so I read every book. It's the well-being, and it's very helpful, especially on this time. But you don't need necessarily, if you don't have to buy it, because we have also a lot of research to provide you. You can find any information on Gallup News if you select well-being. So let's start with that. So for the well-being, I've asked the coach, and the first one, which come back to what you explained at the start of this call to coach, it's use your strength as a resource to build resilience and to respond more effectively to the challenge around you. So strengths are your natural talent. I think it's the first area where we need to go back. Adjusting, but using, definitely. And strength promote well-being. It minimizes the chance of burnout and it boosts productivity. The second point was developing a well-being plan that motivates and work for you, something very individualized, not a common one, something you will have to follow during all this time of this crisis. Okay? Yeah. So strength energizes. So example, for people who got competition, I have this great example. One of my coach, she's Catherine Donaldson. She's brilliant, and she's very high in competition, same as you, Han. So what she's doing, she creates some fitness boot camp at home, and she make it a competition with all her children. I know you have done the great idea to do some tennis challenge yesterday with your children. So because that's energize you, that feed you. So that's an example you can do. But each strength will find some activity you can stimulate you.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that I've done that I haven't done before, surprisingly, but I'm doing it now, is I have one of those big Post-it, pages on my wall at home, and I'm doing it per week. I'm a paper person. Okay. I always will be. I know I should do this digitally, I guess, but I like having it right there in the wall. So I see it all the time, but I have the different things that I need to make sure that I'm ticking from those 5 elements, right? From those 5 elements of well-being. So it's not just fitness, physical fitness. It's also looking at my financial stability and how secure do I feel in my finances in these uncertain times. It's my social and my community. So how often am I reaching out and Zooming with my elderly mom who's in the States who I can't go see? How am I doing on the community side? Am I reaching out to folks in the neighborhood and even going down to my favorite cafe and making sure that I buy something from him like at least 2 or 3 times a week, because I want to make sure he stays in business. And that feeds my well-being, even just knowing that I can support the community in that way. So it's really being intentional about having that and tracking it, so that we're not just all focused in physical or all focused in financial. I think that's useful too.
That's a great point, because that's a trap. Most of people, when you think about well-being, have a natural instinct to link to the physical aspect, but it's really the 5 element. I totally agree.
Yeah,
so another point, it's thinking about your native theme to help us exercise self-compassion, which
so
is
your
clearly,
native theme, did you say?
yes.
Yep.
And because it's very crucial in this time.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
Yeah.
And I will give you another example, which is very easy. It's for achiever. Do a to-do list, which create some multi-faced and help you to jungling at home and stimulate you. And for self-assurance, it can be helpful to back yourself navigating this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then their advice, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going with the well-being. I was going to say something about burnout, but keep going.
Yes, so the last point before to go to the next one, it's don't let responsibility and achiever gang up on you and take on too much on your plate. Yeah. Because it's also very easy to go to stretch in balcony and overdo it and be burnout.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay?
And
yes.
One of the things that I just did a burnout webinar with Claire de Carteret, and one of the things we were talking about was, prior to this time, so many folks said they didn't want to have their staff work from home because they were concerned about performance and productivity. And what we're finding in actuality now is that the larger concern is most likely burnout, because folks are struggling to compartmentalize their work and what they need to have done. They no longer have those barriers and boundaries between homeschooling their children and looking after their house and their family and doing their work. That can be a highly stressful situation to have all of those sort of on top of one another. So being able, anything that we're doing with burnout is obviously reactive. If we can keep that focus on what you just spoke about, Bruno, which is well-being, then perhaps we can put ourselves in a better position to reduce the likelihood of burnout. And again, another link, Jim, sorry, but I'm going to take advantage of this. If you can throw the link to the burnout position paper in the chat, that would be fabulous. If you guys haven't seen that, it's so good. It talks about the root causes of burnout, and specifically, even during this time, the impact that, managing the basics of the pyramid of human needs at work. So expectation, materials and equipment, having the ability to do what you do best, managing those along with mission and purpose. So if you can really dial up the connection between mission and purpose and individuals' jobs, then that has a great inoculation effect against burnout. So those are some of the things you may want to think about, and that paper will walk you through that as well. Sorry, Bruno, back to you on the burnout.
No, you cover everything. That's perfect.
There we go.
So
love it.
Here we go. So here's the link. So now on burnout prevention. So I have 4 points, which are very helpful. Be realistic in what you are aiming to achieve and be kind to yourself. And you point out, it's very interesting because organization thought that if everyone work at home, they might be less productive. But on all the questionnaire I sent to 220 people, well, actually, it's the opposite. Everyone is over productive. So that's be kind to yourself. That's the point. The second one is take regular breaks. Try setting an alarm if you're disciplined at a regular interval and force yourself to get away from your desk and have a coffee, a tea, whatever, but get out. Firstly, because it's important to not burn out, but also for your own well-being on all different elements. Stay active. People with intellection, I found this example brilliant, might be walking, running alone, and thinking. So we know that stay active is very important, especially if you stay long time on your seat. You can also stand up and walk stand up. You can also, some do on treadmill, some do on different options, but try to not sit all day long because it's bad. It's bad for yourself, it's bad for your brain, and also for your eyes. I learned that recently. It's not on this paper, but it's from my doctor. We spend too much time on a screen, even more than before. And what she explained me, it's our eyes need to be humid. And to do that, every minute, normally, we blink a certain number of time. But because we focus on the screen, we don't blink enough time. That's why we start to have irritation. So you just every 1-2 minutes, get out of your screen and blink 15 times and go back on your screen. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't have the science behind, but that might be helpful. And the last one, it's people with executing domain and a strong desire to maintain a high level of productivity need to step back and self-regulate. Otherwise, you go back on basement and balcony. Yeah. So that's the point I extract. Yeah. Now we move on. Would you like to move on job loss?
Do you have some good points to share there? I mentioned the careers website. Jim, how much time do we have left? Do we have a bit of time to go through and still be able to take some questions?
Well, if we're going to go an hour, top of the hour is in 6 minutes.
Okay, great. So we still have enough time. Yeah.
We could do some questions in the post show too.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
okay. So what I would like to prefer to jump, because we have a lot of science and research on career that you just provided, I would like to jump on homeschooling on this topic, because I heard that everywhere. Well, from every people who have some children at home. How do you manage that? Do you feel overwhelmed? How you balance? So this is a few tips and answers I've collected. Design the learning at home in a way that align to your children's talent, the way they focus, research, and learn. Be flexible and realistic. And so that's really about strength-based parenting. Be alert to the strength of your kids and offer support in line with your own strength. So you need to balance and align. You have to work both ways. Have them first explain to you how they think they can work with homeschool and help build out from their idea. And I find this really, really brilliant. For developer, seeking to understand what success looks like for your children. And one do a quarterly get together with other parents, and they kind of brainstorm to see how they can do things better. And it's all the parents who catch up online from the same kids from the same class. That's another one I found it. For arranger, it's to help coordinate what needs to be done, stay in some sort of routine, and of course, command leads the way. Positivity is to make it fun.
Yes.
So that's the one I have from homeschooling.
Yeah. Excellent. That's fantastic. And, again, as we think about, starting to spend some of that time, you may say, oh, Anne, you don't get it. You don't understand how hard it is homeschooling kids and still trying to get work done. There's no time to add anything else to it. But I will share this data slide with you. It's for older students. But when we talk about the importance of strengths to student well-being, our data says students are 4.1 times more likely if they can say that at this school they have the opportunity to do what they do best every day, they're 4 4.1 times more likely to strongly agree that they have thriving well-being. If they can strongly agree that they get to apply their strengths at school, even a homeschool, then it's 3.6 times more likely to have higher well-being. If they can strongly agree that they can use their strengths in many situations, 3.3 times higher. And if they can strongly agree that they know their strengths, that's 3 times higher. So there's a lot of increases in student well-being just by having those strengths conversations with them whilst you're homeschooling.
Yes. And I would like to add another point. Han here is leading all the education department for us in Australia. So if you want some data and some advice about homeschooling, she's the right person because she got 4 children.
None of whom are homeschooling, however. But anyway, so that was, and then what about productivity whilst remote working? Anything else for that?
Yes, I have a lot of that, and that's a big, we could do just one call to coach on this topic. It's a big one. So just a few bullet points. Have put a team together with diverse strengths to work on business challenge. So complementary partnership. That's very helpful. Give individual responsibility for helping with practice and process that will build team effectiveness. As an example, the person with high input to organize the filling system, the deliberator to run risk review, the person with high individualization and includer to ensure all voices are heard in the Zoom meeting. So it's really everyone brings their best and partner together. Now, another one, very important, it's set up clear boundary at home. You need to break down and to have some limit, otherwise it's not sustainable. Known when you are at your best, because we all work with different time zone in your biological or clock. So I know that if I want to learn, I need to wake up at 4 a.m. and everyone has some different time. And one of the coaches say it's better to focus on 5 hours productive with clarity than 8, 12 hours when it's the wrong time and you're tired.
Yep.
That's it for this part.
Yeah, excellent. Fantastic, Bruno. You have gathered so much good information from our coaches. And thank you again to the coaches that we acknowledged and recognized at the beginning of the show on that screen. And I think Jim's going to put it up again. So thanks, guys, for taking the time to send something else out there. And I think there were some other folks who came back even later today, but we were already, it was kind of done and dusted at that point. But thank you. We do appreciate it. And for your support and your advocacy of this. So, Jim, do we have any questions from that very busy chat room that we would like to bring to the fore?
It has been busy, but let's save those for a little bit of post-show for that. That way we can get I think there's some great advice in here. We can get that kind of wrapped up for a recorded show, and then we can kind of dialogue with folks who can stay around for some extra time. How's that sound?
That sounds great. And I would... Seeing that we are really, in fact, out of time, that probably makes sense anyway. But Bruno, thank you so much for coming on today. You brought all of your strengths to make this happen, and I'm really, really pleased. You brought amazing information to us, and thank you so much. We value you as you lead the coaching community, just as I'm sure they value you as well. But your internal colleagues here at Gallup value you as well in that role. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Anne and Jim, for organizing that. It's a privilege to be in this call to coach session.
It's great having both of you doing this as well. And I think a great reminder, like there's no one size fits all. This is why people need coaches. They need support. They need help because every situation's different. What works for me, I was mentioning in the chat room, like if this was 10 years ago and I had to homeschool my kids, that's a whole different world than today where it's me and my 21-year-old daughter right here. It's just a different world. And so we are glad you are out there on the front lines working with folks, and that's never been more important than it is right now. So I hope you found some value in that, some great suggestions. There's still plenty more, and networking, of course, together as a community is most important. With that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available, and mentioned a bunch of them. You can kind of start at gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. We have a ton available for you as well. If you have any questions after the fact, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'd love to have you jump in our, if you're joining for the first time, we'd love to have you get registered with us over at Eventbrite. So you go to gallup.eventbrite.com, follow us there. You'll get a notification every time I add a new event. And we have about 40 events lined up between now and July. At this point, love to have you come to some of those because it's just more fun when it's live. So do that today. And then don't forget to join us in our Facebook group. So facebook.com/group/call-to-coach, as well in our LinkedIn group if you want to head out to CliftonStrengths, train coaches there as well. And then one reminder in all of this, our 2020 summit has gone completely virtual, and you can now sign up for that for a pretty low price. So head out to gallupatwork.com. Everybody's $195, and you can get involved in that with us as well. We'd love to see you there. More details on the site and lots more information coming here in the month of May. I want to thank you for joining us today. Again, if you're staying live, stay around for some post-show. We'll answer some specific questions. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.